Hello, and welcome to Keeping Watch, Cape Cod's land, water, and wildlife. We'll be your host for today. I'm Teikyo Mowchan of AmeriCorps Cape Cod. AmeriCorps Cape Cod is a service organization where members dedicate a year of service to the environmental needs here on Cape Cod. Keep an eye out for other members sporting the AmeriCorps A and some of the footage you'll see today.
I'm Michael Locke, Executive Director of the nonprofit Harwich Conservation Trust, and we're thrilled to be here with you today for the inaugural episode of Keeping Watch. And what better day to launch Keeping Watch than April 22nd. Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day, everybody. You know, Cape Cod's a pretty special place. It has some of the most beautiful beaches in New England. It's got some amazing historic landmarks. And, you know, I think it might have some of the best oysters, anywhere.
I agree.
But Cape Cod is a delicate place, and it has a delicate ecosystem, one that many people overlook.
Today, we're talking about an element of that Cape Cod ecology that's probably not that familiar to everybody: fire.
Fire on Cape Cod. It's not something that you normally associate with Cape Cod's beaches and waters, fire. But it turns out it's actually a critical part of Cape Cod's ecology.
We met with Dave Crary Jr., who works with the Cape Cod National Seashore, and he and his colleagues have been using fire to keep the environment in that area healthier as well as keep people safer.
We also talked with Chucky Green of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe's Natural Resource Department. He talked to us a little bit about how the tribe's traditions of burning that stretch back through millennia are key to keeping the environment that we all live in these days healthy and vibrant.
And we also had a chance to talk with Seth Wilkinson of Wilkinson Ecological Design, who really shared his deep knowledge and experience with using fire management as a tool to control unwanted invasive plants.
And I sat down with Chief Joseph Maruca of the West Barnstable Fire Department to discuss some of the safety concerns surrounding fire on Cape Cod and to alleviate some of the taboo surrounding it.
Stay tuned after the main program when we will highlight an event hosted by Harwich Conservation Trust, which will give folks an opportunity to volunteer and clean up their community.
Sounds good. Well, on with the show. You know, although it's not necessarily common knowledge, wildfire on Cape is something that's a big part of the ecology here. In fact, we had the opportunity to talk to Dave Crary, the fire manager of the National Seashore, to give us some historical context of fire ecology on Cape Cod and to see what he and his colleagues are doing to keep us all safe.
It's a fascinating look.
Good morning, I'm David Crary Jr. from Eastham, and I'm the Fire Management Officer here at Cape Cod National Seashore. Today we're working at the former MITRE site in South Truro, Massachusetts, a former research radar military site that's grown up over the years, and we are clearing vegetation from around these three former laboratories. Over 14,000 years ago, the last great glacial ice sheet left this area, leaving behind the substrate, which is Cape Cod. Vegetation's grown on that for at least the last 8,000 years, forest vegetation, and it's accumulated over those years. The material that was left by the glacier gives rise to a very xeric vegetation type. Pitch pine trees, huckleberry, black oaks, scrub oaks, those grow in very dry sites. The glacial ponds in Wellfleet and Truro, those deep, beautiful ponds, cores have been taken to the sediments, and then it's been analyzed for both charcoal layers and for pollen. The analysis of that shows that probably 3 times a century, every 30 to 40 years, a fire burned through the landscapes of Wellfleet and Truro, the landscape that you see behind me. Fires burn through this landscape every 30 or 40 years. And during that time, fuels accumulate, that is litter, from the trees. That would be leaf litter from the deciduous trees and needle cast from the conifer trees, plus branches and dead shrubs and some trees blow over. There's a lot of accumulation of fuel. Every 30 or 40 years, the fire coming through will consume that fuel and set us back to an earlier seral stage and start another forest or start another grassland. Without the impact of fire, meaning if fire is disrupted and doesn't occur, the accumulation of fuel just keeps going. Here at the Seashore, we're about 60 to 80 years without a major fire, so we have twice the amount of accumulated fuel on most of the landscape. This accumulation will, at some point, burn. Now, we are burning it proactively through prescribed burning, but there will be a wildfire, and it will consume all of that material. In a high wind, very dry situation, the landscape will change quite drastically and very quickly. Each of the towns of the Lower Cape, the fire chief, who happens to be the fire warden, is in charge of all wildland fire activity. That would be suppression and prescribed fire. The National Seashore has agreements with each of the towns that we will conduct prescribed fires on National Seashore properties, and we can also assist the town on any prescribed fire within its boundary. The Cape Cod National Seashore conducts about 40 prescribed burns a year. We also, during the spring open burn season, conduct pile burns where we remove vegetation, pile it, and burn it. We take the forest products, the debris, and we dispose of them through fire. Often areas where we do cut, pile, and burn projects, we will come back in a year or two and conduct a prescribed burn, a broadcast burn, where we burn almost every square foot of the area or the forest behind me. We use water resources. We have engines, sprinkler lines, hose lines. We sometimes rake fuel out of the way. An area with no fuel won't burn. And we use roads, trails, power lines, electric lines. We use water bodies when we burn in and around the Herring River in Wellfleet. All of those areas, those control lines, are used to maintain a safe perimeter around a prescribed fire. Prescribed fire reduces the risk of wildland fire because we remove fuels. The more often we remove fuels with prescribed fire, the less intense a fire can be, and the easier any fire would be to suppress. We monitor the effectiveness of our burns and we apply fire again. When we have a full forest, as you see behind me, we often burn once, and then within 7 years we burn again. And then the rotation would be 13 to 30 years after that until we get back to that 3 times a century cycle that I discussed earlier.
Well, it's very interesting with that segment with Dave Crary, Jr. of Cape Cod National Seashore. It really shows sort of a modern approach to prescribed burning. But it's not just the recent techniques, more modern techniques that have been part of fire management on Cape Cod. Native Americans have been traditionally using wildfire management in a number of ways. To learn more, we talked to Chucky Green.
My name is George Chucky Green. I am the Assistant Director of Natural Resources for the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. My main responsibilities is grant writing, assist the director in management of the grant programs, implementation of programs. Fire is one of those. All sorts of resource management is what we do. Native people are scientists of a different breed. We use the science of observation, and we always have. And we observed in early years the disturbances, the natural disturbances that happened here on the Cape and happened everywhere in Wampanoag territory, where you would have fires started by lightning, where you would have damage to the woodlands by storm. We picked up on that after we had fire, we had a change in the habitat, a change in what we got from the habitat. Blueberries are tied into burning. They're a fire-dependent plant. If you were to go into an area that had not had fire for a long period of time, you would have multiple blueberry bushes everywhere, but you would not have any fruit. Or you would have a minimal amount of fruit. Whereas if you go in the season after a burn, you can take blueberries off in handfuls. In order to make a fruit tree produce, you have to prune it back. Now, if you go in and you light a fire, all of the small branches that come off of a blueberry will be burned back by the fire. And once burned back by the fire, it has the same action as pruning an apple tree. Now you have more new stems that are coming out that can actually produce fruit. So it denses the fruit. And then you're refeeding the soil. You're taking all that burned matter and putting it back into the soil. So that's like fertilizing them with their own debris, and it works well. And I mean, we've seen this in Maine. The Maine tribes burn their blueberry patches in the same way that we go out into the woodland and burn because of the same result. But I mean, there are many fire-dependent plants. I mean, if you go to an area that has not been treated by fire and try to pass through an area of Cape Cod, you'll have briars and grapevines and brush that you can't pass through easily. If you put fire to it, the fire gets rid of the debris, it gets rid of the brush, it brings everything down so it's like a park where you can pass easily out of the beaten path and be able to enjoy the forest. And we did 32 acres of burning and mechanical treatment to open up the overstory and to put it right. Now, the partners of the Mashpee Wildlife Refuge are looking at 500 contiguous acres onto what we did, because other people now are seeing that the practices that we are exhibiting actually work. That's the most difficult part, to bring people's minds around to the idea that something that doesn't sound like it's going to be great can be. When I first discussed with the tribe burning and cutting trees, a lot of the tribal members, the newer tribal members, didn't understand. They thought that we as Native people did nothing. But we've been in forest management forever, time immemorial. So it was a part of what we did. But the tribe needed to bring people back to our ancient practices. We as a tribe, we burned twice a year wherever we were. We saw the production of blueberries, we saw the production of medicine plants, we saw the return of things that we had thought were gone forever. So by bringing fire back, a Native tradition, we have been able to reestablish the habitat.
It was great to have a chance to also talk with Seth Wilkinson of Wilkinson Ecological Design, who shared with us his experience and deep knowledge of using wildfire management as a way to control unwanted invasive plants.
Something that is often overlooked on Cape Cod as well as fire.
I'm Seth Wilkinson. I'm the restoration ecologist and president of Wilkinson Ecological Design. We're based here in Orleans. We started in 1999 with the mission of working exclusively on ecological restoration projects. So that takes us in a lot of different directions, ranging from invasive species management to coastal stabilization projects, but the common thread that runs through all of our projects is ecological restoration. We've done a number of projects over the years that have involved prescribed fire, prescribed burning. It has, I believe, always been done in collaboration with the Cape Cod National Seashore, where we were using fire to help manage invasive species. One of the questions around invasive plant management, which is important to understand and answer, is why is it a problem in the first place? Most plants are good. Most plants have value to wildlife, to the ecosystem in which they grow, and offer ecosystem services to humans. Not all plants are created equal when you consider regional contexts. The reality is that the plant community we have here has adapted with humans, with Native Americans much longer than settlers. Wildlife, human plant interactions have been ongoing for thousands of years here. When you bring a species in the last 100, 200, or 300 years since colonization, that plant is not going to have any many natural predators, pathogens, pests, which serve ecological functions to keep populations in check. Sometimes people will say, well, if something's here long enough, wildlife must start using it. Well, there's actually data on that was published in 2002. Phragmites australis, which is the tall common reed that grows in some salt marshes, mostly what you see along the roadsides and wetlands is the invasive ecotype. In their homeland, Phragmites supports 170 herbivores. And in 300 years that Phragmites has been introduced to North America, only 5 species of herbivores are using it over 300 years, as compared to the 170 in its home range, where it had thousands of years to adapt, co-adapt, and co-evolve together. It really is an ecosystem disrupting plant, and the plants that it displaces, cattail, it commonly displaces cattail, and cattail is valuable. Everything from muskrats to red-winged blackbirds. Both of those species will adapt, but both represent significantly less valuable habitats than the cattail that likely was displaced by the invasive exotic version of cattail, which is what Phragmites represents. Typically, it's burning done in conjunction with cutting, pulling, some other type of mechanical removal, or herbicide use and other management techniques. Those are some of the more common ones. But you need to understand the plant biology at a pretty deep level of the target invasive plant that you're trying to manage, as well as the biology of the plants which you're trying to support and restore, and make sure that the right management technique is being used. So fire used exclusively for management is actually not effective on most invasive species. Generally speaking, it's best, in my opinion, to consider prescribed burns as one of the many tools in the land management toolbox. It's most similar to cutting a plant to the ground, but it obviously does have some other benefits. For example, if there is good herbaceous or grass cover on the ground layer, it will burn that, expose some mineral soils. Fire can also help to keep certain predators in check, so it damages larvae, eggs, or the same can happen with invasive plant materials. They can be damaged during these fire events that would have effects beyond just a cut would otherwise. Burning is more effective at destroying those plant materials above the ground. That's why it is a valuable management tool.
That's very interesting. Suffice to say, fire is a very useful tool for removing plant material from a given area, for dealing with invasive species, or for just pushing back the buildup of fuel to prevent wildfires. Fire is such a taboo subject, I thought we should sit down with somebody who deals with the safety of it all. We talked to Chief Joseph Maruca of the West Barnstable Fire Department, and we talked about some of the safety concerns around fire and why, because of its strict regulation and usage, there's nothing for any of us to fear about it as a concept. And I'm joined here with Chief Joseph Maruca. Is it just the fire departments in the towns that are doing these burns, or are there like smaller natural resource departments that are doing it as well?
It's mostly, I shouldn't say that. There's no good single answer for that, but it's fire departments, it's the Massachusetts Department of Conservation, Fire Control, and it's the National Seashore is involved, the military base, Mass Military Reservation, Joint Base Cape Cod, I got to come up with the right name for it these days. They're involved in a lot of this because a lot of their base is wildland that is very susceptible to fire. So there's probably a half dozen agencies between state and local that participate in these.
Those are the only ones that are actually authorized to be doing these fires. People aren't just going out.
No, you can't just go do
this.
Yeah. You have to have a written permit from the State Department of Environmental Protection, DEP.
Okay.
We have a permit as the West Barnstable Fire Department that includes the entire community. So we're the permitted agency. We would have to be the lead agency on our permit. I would assume Department of Conservation Resources has a state permit that they can operate within their jurisdictional areas beyond, in multiple town areas. But generally, we're the lead agency for West Barnstable. The Yarmouth Fire Department would be the lead agency for prescribed fires in the town of Yarmouth.
Okay.
And those permits set up, you know, they're lengthy documents, and they set up very specific protocols for when and how we can operate these fires.
And I think even the National Seashore has to go to the given town, whichever the
Right.
fire department there, and okay with them.
These are collaborative operations. Well, we might do a small one on our own. We don't do it without notifying our neighbors, without checking in with everybody, without running it through the process. You know, we could go out and do a small, like an acre burn. We wouldn't need a lot of outside resource to do it, but we would certainly collaborate with outside resources so that they know what we're up to and when we're doing it.
One of the main reasons I wanted to bring you on the show is just because fire is kind of taboo, and frequently it is kind of a scary concept that is something that is necessary, you know, especially since this concept of 30 years having these huge wildfires is kind of a daunting prospect. But if that's something that is so strictly regulated and controlled, I think that's very reassuring to a lot of people. Hopefully.
It should be. You know, we try to do it in a very, we burn these areas in small pieces so that we can control the fire, so that we can extinguish it if it's not behaving the way we expect it to behave. Right. Sometimes you light these and the fire behavior is hotter, more intense, and faster than you're expecting, so you would put it out at that point.
So the areas that you're frequently burning are these larger nature preserves, like forest areas. Does that mean that areas that are more developed, that perhaps there's no jurisdiction over, are still sort of like building up the same fuel that would usually cause the wildfires?
We're not doing prescribed fires in between houses,
right? Yeah,
or in subdivision buffer zones, you know, of forest for the most part, and those areas do tend to build up a lot of downed fuel and can blow up into wildfires pretty quickly. But there's a couple of good things going for us on Cape Cod with those. One is that we have a good road network, and we can get to these fires quickly. To extinguish them, and people tend to spot them quickly. So you dial 911, and 6, 7, 8 minutes later we're there. Right. Whereas if the fire is in the conservation area, it could take us 18 minutes, and that's a long time for a fire to just keep burning and burning. Because they grow. It does. They grow exponentially. You know, they double in size every minute. And so you can imagine how this thing's growing and growing while we're accessing it. Whereas if it's behind someone's house, and it's a small area like this table, or it's a quarter-acre fire, and they call us up and say I have a fire, well, we can be there in 6 to 8 minutes, and get water on this fire very quickly.
It won't easily get out of control.
We have good roads, driveway access. We can get to these fires quickly, and that's something that we pride ourselves on, being fast.
Oh, excellent.
So,
well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. This was great.
Adding a little bit of light to the safety of it all.
Yeah, we do a lot of training for this, and we take this seriously. And we try to do a good job with everything we do. So it's good. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
All right, have fun. Enjoy.
So there you have it, a little bit more context to fire ecology on Cape Cod and the role that fire plays in this world that we all know and love.
It's true. Keeping the Cape Cod ecology healthy is important. It takes many different aspects of what we do and understand here on the Cape. Another one is just really keeping litter at bay, cleaning it up, being good stewards of the lands around us. And there's an opportunity coming up in Harwich for folks to volunteer to help clean up the beaches and walking paths and local roads through an event called the Tour de Trash.
Oh, well, let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Garrett Jansen. I'm an AmeriCorps Cape Cod member, and I'm here at the Harwich Community Center, where I hope you'll join me on Saturday, April 29th, for our 3rd annual Tour de Trash. The town of Harwich, the Harwich Conservation Trust, and AmeriCorps Cape Cod will all be here helping to organize our dozens of volunteers to gather into groups, go out through the streets of Harwich, and pick up trash. For more information and to pre-register, please visit our website, harwichconservationtrust.org. We're meeting here at 9:30, where you'll receive your handy pickers, vests, and garbage bags, and then taking to the streets. Lunch will be served at noon. We look forward to seeing you, and we very much look forward to seeing the Harwich streets clean and litter-free. Thank you. We'd like to thank our dedicated volunteers, especially Dave Callahan and Nancy Hip, who founded this event 3 years ago, as well as our partners, the Town of Harwich and the Harwich Conservation Trust, and our donors, Stop and Shop, the Nauset Disposal Company, and the Hot Stove Saloon. Thank you so much, everyone, for your generous contributions and labor.
Well, Garrett did a great job. You folks at AmeriCorps are indispensable, I will say, to the Cape Cod community. So thank you, and Garrett and your team very much. Naturally, the litter does accumulate, especially through the winter and spring months.
It's hard to see with all the snow.
It is, and but boy, it is out there, and we do need help cleaning it up. So for details, visit harwichconservationtrust.org, and you can learn more about how to become involved in that Saturday, April 29th event.
Thank you for joining us on this first episode, inaugural episode of Keeping Watch, Cape Cod's land, water, and wildlife. I hope you've learned a little something about the environment that we all live in and share together here on Cape Cod.
It's a special place. I sure learned a lot.
Well, I've been Teikyo Mowchan with AmeriCorps Cape Cod.
I'm Michael Locke with the Harwich Conservation Trust.
And we'll see you next time.